Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. My guest today has experienced the weaponization of the justice system more than almost anyone you've heard of, and his story is wild. With me today to tell us all about it is John Strand, the maverick conservative, an actor, author, spokesman, and now the creative director at America's Frontline Doctors and GoldCare.com. A former J6 hostage based in Naples, Florida, he is now running for Congress in Florida's 19th district. After serving 1 year of a nearly 3-year sentence as an innocent man, he was vindicated by the Supreme Court, achieving a total triumph of his appeal, legally exonerated of all charges. His new book, Patriot Plea, is an explosive expose of government corruption, political weaponization, and shocking prison abuse, a result of his unwavering stand for truth and justice while leading a red pill revolution. John, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing about your experience.
Absolutely, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, this is going to be quite the conversation. Your story, I call it wild. It really is. It's shocking that it can happen in modern day America, operating under the greatest constitution the world has ever seen. But things went really, really sideways on January 6, 2021. And you were most unfortunately on the receiving end of a lot of that injustice. So I think that the most important question I can ask you in this whole interview is, what in the world happened to you on January 6th?
Yeah, great question. What happened? What happened was I was, as you mentioned, the recipient on the receiving end of the inevitable result of tyranny and corruption in systems of power. So, as you said, this is the greatest country in the history of the world based on the Declaration and the Constitution. Those are the sacred guardrails that are supposed to constrain the government from becoming a burden. But when the fundamentals of freedom are ignored, as they have been for quite some time in our country, you have a corruption of the people in positions of power, you have a deterioration of those guardrails, and then you get what happened to me. So I'll briefly tell you the story. It's quite wild, as you mentioned, and it's all contained in the book behind me, Patriot Plea, which is about to come out on June 23rd. But I was living a normal American life. I was a pretty average guy, pursuing the American dream. Came from a solid family of Judeo-Christian values, and that all came crashing around me when I made some choices to speak up and exercise the First Amendment, to push back against the lies of the COVID propaganda in 2020, and to push back against the lies of the Marxist BLM Summer of Love movement that was burning down the streets of cities across the country, including my own neighborhood. So those choices led me to be publicly known and perceived by certainly Hollywood and the media and entertainment world, where I was working professionally, made me an enemy, put me on the outs. And that led me to work with Dr. Simone Gold with America's Frontline Doctors in our efforts to advocate for civil rights. So I was just doing my job, pursuing the American dream, but then doing my job to defend the American dream when it was clearly under attack. And we were traveling in Washington, D.C. Actually, we were traveling on the whole East Coast, doing a lot of speaking as Dr. Gold was bringing the message of truth about COVID. And January 6th was just one on a number of tour stops for us. And then, of course, we got caught up in that crowd and the events of that day. So 12 days later, just returning back to our work, my life was shattered forever when we were assaulted by an FBI SWAT team, front door shattered with a battering ram. I was disappeared in jail for 4 days without a phone call, finally bonded out to find myself facing 5 charges, totaling 23 years of prison and $500,000 in fines. That included a 20-year felony. And then, Kyle, what happened next was quite remarkable. I've never heard of a plea deal like this. But facing 5 charges and 23 years of prison, I was offered a single misdemeanor plea deal. Again, I've never heard of such a thing, and it obviously calls into question the validity of the 5 charges for 23 years. If you can give a single misdemeanor, there's something off there, obviously. But the bottom line is that's a get-out-of-jail-free card no rational person would or should turn down. But I refused it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's remarkable. And even what happened after that is shocking, but let's go back. I want to go back to the day of January 6th. Can you
Hmm.
share a few more details about what you were doing there, how close you were to what was happening and people breaking into the Capitol? Did you go inside? What exactly specifically went down during your time there on that day?
Great question. For reference for the viewers, I strongly recommend, of course, that you order the book as soon as you can, johnstrand.com/book. I also recommend that people watch a quick, roughly 13-minute video at johnstrand.com/J6. It's got a lot of views on X and across social media platforms. And we put this out during the trial and sentencing period of the story. It will blow your mind. In 13 minutes, you get to watch all the security camera footage of me inside the building for the entire
Wow.
duration. And I narrate to explain what happened and what I was seeing and understanding at the time that it happened. You will never look at J6 the same
Mm.
again after you watch that video. But in short summary, I started out in the early morning at the ellipse where President Trump was speaking. Of course, weeks before the event actually happened, it was planned that there would be a morning speech, a ceremonial march to the Capitol, and then afternoon speeches at the Capitol. That was always the plan. We were scheduled in advance to be part of that speaking tour. We had a government-approved permit, etc. So then, at the steps of the Capitol building, when things were confusing and not going the way we thought they were, but we were surrounded by people and trapped at that point, Capitol Police started attacking the crowd and really instigated and manufactured a riot out of almost entirely peaceful protesters until the time when rubber bullets and gas bombs and etc. started flying. So that caused the doors, the doors were open from the inside, and the ruckus caused people to be pushed and flushed inside, including myself. So that video will really tell you the story, and again, in shocking detail. But there were a couple of hours of confusion and chaos, which were largely manufactured and caused by government elements, nefarious and otherwise. And then the rest of the day in total was a whole lot of American political protest in sort of the normal grand tradition. But of
Mhm.
course, the riot was manufactured on purpose and then utilized and weaponized for this grand insurrection narrative that we've all been suffering from and dealing with for the last 4 or 5 years.
Right. So you were at the morning rally when Donald Trump was speaking and saying, we're going to walk to the Capitol, we're going to keep it peaceful. Was that the vibe there? Were people calm? Were they peaceful even when you got to the Capitol?
Yeah, entirely. There was no sense of certainly not violence, and there wasn't even any sense of I don't know, nefariousness or ominous feelings. It was very much, like I said, a very MAGA forward kind of event of which I've been a part of many, and most of us have been to or seen Trump rallies and Trump events of this nature. They're patriotic, they're exuberant, they're generally positive, and they're generally peaceful by and
Hmm.
large for the most part, obviously. So that was very much the case here. Largest crowd I've ever seen in my life. I'm very confident there were at least a full million people in the city that day. It's a good chance there were more than a million, but it was definitely up towards that number. Enormous crowd. It took it over an hour to walk a distance of 18 minutes
Mm.
up Constitution Avenue. So yeah, it did not seem strange at all or anything to be concerned about until I was on the steps, squashed by a large number of people, and then sort of out of nowhere, as best as I can tell, suddenly we were attacked by the cops
Mm.
without any provocation or explanation for why that was happening. And then the doors opened and I was pushed inside. I was not on the west side, which is where more of these skirmishes were instigated to happen. But even on the east side where I was, there was still um, unjustified attack by police against the people there.
Well, if you haven't been to the Capitol, I've been several times, and I know you've been at least once. Um, it's a vast space in front of it.
Yes.
I mean, it's very open. You have the main opening that goes to Constitution, but it's just a large space. I think even seeing it on TV, it actually looks smaller. Looks like
Yes.
a more intimate space, but it's really big. So there are
Really
all these
grand
people.
plaza.
Right, right. So when you're walking there with the sort of earlier peaceful rally crowd, when you got there to the Capitol, was there a different crowd there already?
No, there was minimal crowd because we were one of the earlier folks to get there, trying to get in position to actually participate in the speeches.
Okay.
So there were handfuls of people, but there wasn't a large crowd there yet. And then the crowd backfilled over the ensuing
Mm,
minutes.
okay.
And to your point, the plaza is very large.
Mm,
Also, the interior of the Capitol is enormous and cavernous, and disorienting if you're not familiar with it. And there isn't any obvious signage directing people in the Capitol for the most
mm-hmm.
part. So if you're not very familiar with where you are and how to get somewhere, when you first walk in, you're confused and lost. So
Mm-hmm.
we just stayed within the red velvet rope stanchions because that just made sense and seemed like the appropriate place for the general public to be walking. And we weren't quite sure which direction or where we were going. We were just trying to kind of get out of the building because we had fallen and been flushed in, pushed from behind by a large crowd through the east doors. And there was such a tumult there, we couldn't have
Mm.
exited out that door at the time. We ended up exiting out that same door. It just took about 45 minutes. But for the moment, we looked for another exit that would be calm. And we could tell there were people coming in from multiple entry points because
Mm-hmm.
when we came in the door, we saw that there were already at least dozens of people in there, kind of milling around without any sort of obvious direction or purpose. So yeah, it was sort of a bizarre high school field trip flashback,
Yeah.
kind of a surreal moment. And truly, people were taking selfies and pictures of the gorgeous art and historic elements of our nation's capital, of the people's house. So it really did feel like a field trip for us. You know.
Yeah, it's so bizarre because when you do go into the Capitol, normally you go through TSA like security. I mean, this is not just like you're going into a museum or across the street even to the Library of Congress. You go through serious security. It's a slow process. And so this was so strange to see this being played out, of course filtered through what the media was feeding everyone, and just seeing people just burst through doors and be let through doors. It was very confusing, I think, for people
It
because it
certainly
was
was.
so abnormal. But was your feeling that since Capitol Police were directing you that you would naturally follow them and do what they were telling you to do because it was coming from them?
Basically, when we were on the steps before the doors had been opened from the inside, again, it was a normal protest experience up until that moment when suddenly flashbangs went off. They sound like grenades or
Mm-hmm.
bombs. They're terrifying. Rubber bullets were shot, gas in the air. So suddenly we were under assault. You just instinctively know that, and people start panicking.
Mm-hmm.
I was a licensed security guard at the time. I do have experience in training, reacting with crowds, and understanding those signs. So my instincts told me obviously something bad is happening, and presumably law enforcement are around. It's the Capitol, so they should respond and begin to give instructions or disseminate the crowd in some form.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was crushed up against the doors, unable to really move safely. In fact, there's footage of that you'll see. But again, I was waiting because I didn't have another choice, but presumed that law enforcement would come and intervene in the
Yeah.
situation and either direct people away from the doors or open them to allow people to stream through just as a traffic control mechanism. That seemed as likely as anything else. And then in fact the doors did open from the inside. And there was no other option other than for the pressure of the folks built up
Mm-hmm.
to just stream through. So because of the chaos and unexpected nature of what was going on, no one expected a normal procedure of going through a metal detector
Mm-hmm.
as you normally would on a calm day. Um, but we didn't know what else to do or what the law enforcement response or expectation was. So once we were inside and when most people were inside, they were just taking pictures, walking through, and expecting to kind of walk out the other side,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm. And you
So.
were recording. Were you recording on your cell phone?
So obviously there's many security cameras throughout the building. If you watch johnstrand.com/J6, you will see a video comprised of all the
Mm-hmm.
CCTV footage that we sewed together of wherever I was located in the building. I was not
Gotcha.
personally filming
Okay.
other than a couple of moments when Dr. Gold decided, hey, I'll give the speech that I was supposed to give on a stage with congresspeople and so forth. And clearly, I'm not going to be able to do that at this point in the afternoon. But I did come here to deliver this speech, and it was a very important moment and a very important message that
Mm-hmm.
she wanted to deliver. In fact, she had given the speech successfully at Freedom Plaza the day before to about probably almost 10,000 people. and there were supposed to be hundreds of thousands, as there were that day, that she would give it on the 6th. So she gave it inside the Capitol to the best of her ability. I filmed it on my phone, and the rest has become history.
So you make it out of the Capitol building, and then were you living in DC at the time?
No, Dr. Gold and myself both were living in California, in Los Angeles area at the time. My father was a U.S. Navy officer stationed in California, which is where I was born. Stationed in Florida, where my brother was born, and Pennsylvania, where my sister was born before getting out of active duty. Dr. Gold is originally from New York, but was practicing anonymously as an ER doctor in Los Angeles for over 20 years. So we had both started working together with frontline doctors during the COVID era in Los Angeles. We were traveling to the East Coast for a number of speeches during January 6th in 2021. And then we returned after the end of our tour about 8 days later. And 12 days later, ironically, it was Martin Luther King Day. January 18th of 2021 is when the battering ram shattered the door and changed our lives forever. And that was in Beverly Hills.
Wow, incredible. Okay, so you're hauled off, you're thrown in jail with no phone call, no
For 4
access
days.
to an
Yeah,
attorney,
nothing.
and then you're given the most nonsensical plea deal option of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, what was going through your head? Was this just surreal that they were potentially going to charge you and lock you away for so many years over just simply being there that day?
Exactly. It was surreal. It was insane. It did not make any sense, as exactly as you mentioned. And I, of course, quickly determined the scope of what was going on, reviewing the charges against me, reviewing, of course, the insane media coverage, and the what's the word? I mean, just animalistic hatred and just maniacal intensity to it's like I call it riot porn, and the way that they just like frothing at the mouth recycled these accelerated and accented images and video footage. I mean, they pumped up the volume. They added in screams. The production they put on for the J6 Select Committee, which these hearings were held during primetime television on all the major networks across the United States. For the next 2 years after it happened. So this was, I could clearly see at the very beginning, just as I could see at the beginning of COVID, I could see where this was going. This was a massive coordinated effort to build a narrative, to frame a certain segment of people as the enemy, to demonize them in the public view, and make it acceptable to hate them and to destroy them. And of course, Kyle, that's exactly what has been happening for the last now 5+ years. I've helped lead wearej6.com and just a movement of J6 defendants and J6 victims that have had their lives systematically dismantled and destroyed at levels that I can barely even describe to you. I hope your audience, again, please will read the book and really just take it upon yourselves to get to the bottom of the truth of what really happened with J6. And we should care about the victims. They matter. And the ways in which their lives have been devastated is, again, I think it is completely unprecedented in American history. Some folks will reference the Japanese internment, and I'm not making light of that. That was a terrible situation, of course. And some restitution was made later after the fact in recognizing that that was a terrible decision by our government and people were mistreated. But this mistreatment is at an entirely other level. And it has been entirely politicized and politically weaponized by one political faction against another. And the full force of the federal government being applied with these FBI SWAT team raids, which alone are incredibly deadly and devastating. Not to mention, they put us through hell, Kyle, for 4+ years of the judicial system. It ruins your life. The process is the punishment that is devastating beyond belief. Also, the reputational damage is irreversible. You can never undo that. And it's institutional defamation powered by the full force of the federal government. I'm not aware of anything like this that's ever happened in U.S. history.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. Well, let's talk a little bit about the dark parts, about the prison sentence. I mean, you were sentenced to how many years? You served one, right?
Yeah, the prosecutors asked for 8 years at my sentencing. So they effectively tried to lock me up in prison for the rest of my young adult life. 8 years, which is mind blowing. Again, you watch that video and you realize no matter what you think of J6 or no matter what certain characters might have done that day, this guy shouldn't even be in a courtroom,
Mm.
much less in prison. It's very obvious. I was there doing my job. I was serving as a security person for a speaker, and so forth. So it just defies believability that they would put me through this and then ask for 8 years in a federal prison. But that's what they asked for. The judge gave them almost three, and I served a complete year, 366 days, because it
Mm.
was a leap year. The reason I only served the 1 year and then was immediately released is because the most impactful, powerful part of my particular story is that I had this unbelievable, insane plea deal between 23 years and a felony or a single misdemeanor, and I turned it down.
Mm-hmm.
I explained that in the book in great detail. It was quite a process over years. There were a lot of conversations. There were a lot of pressures. There were a lot of things at play in that decision and in that process. And I knew I would turn it down immediately and then had to continue that road for 2 years. It's like watching a freight train in slow
Mm.
motion in reverse that's coming towards you and it's going to smash your life. So it was quite a moment and quite a feature of the story to turn down that plea deal. And the end result is that it's only because I pled not guilty that I had the legal option to appeal the
Mm.
district level convictions, which I did, and I won, Kyle.
Yeah.
It was an absolute miracle, first, that it was even accepted to be heard. It went straight to the Supreme Court. Those are very rare. And it was accepted. We won. And I was released,
Mm.
being completely vindicated by that Supreme Court ruling. And then having four charges remaining, which were misdemeanors. Of course, I'd already served the year time for those. And I was pressured at that time, after being released from prison, to relinquish the rest of my appeal
Mm.
because it would take additional time and expense and misery to continue pressing forward. And when that pressure came from attorneys and everyone else, I said, "Have you met me before?" Because we got into this whole process on the basis that I am innocent. I will never be pressured or bullied into bearing false witness,
Mm.
including against myself, and I will not participate in a lie that is meant to destroy President Trump, demonize his supporters, and tear the fabric of our society apart. And so that was the principle and the integrity that I had to hold fast to during this process. And I had no guarantee. In fact, it was far more likely I would rot in there for years
Mm.
or maybe get killed. I mean, federal prison is not a joke. But I just had to believe that God would take care of the rest if I was faithful to be obedient to his call. And certainly his call was to choose what was right, reject what was wrong, and speak the truth without apology and
Mm.
without fear. So I did that and pressed forward with the entire appeal and was successful. The DOJ vacated all five charges.
Mhm.
So that's actually the best possible result. It was rewinded as if they had never charged me in the first place. So there are no actual charges against me. I have no record. I am completely innocent, as I always was, and that's now been proven legally, as well as, through the course of demonstrating the history of what happened.
Mhm. Well, you should never have been charged in the first place.
Of
And it was
course.
an interesting time, and tell me if my theory is right here, because when you put all these pieces together and listen to such a harrowing experience that you went through from simply just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think many, if not most, really, if not nearly everyone who was there that day was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But
Yes,
certain
of course.
people in positions of authority in our government at the time saw an opportunity, and it was an extreme judicial overreach, and they needed you to confirm that they needed you to cover their mistake, right? So you needed to at
Exactly right.
least plead to the one misdemeanor so that they could have justification for what they had done.
Yes, Kyle, that's an astute observation, and that is exactly why I was so insistent on declining the plea
Hmm.
and taking this long, difficult, very painful road. I would have done it anyway, simply because I was innocent, and that was a lie.
Mm.
But I was additionally, empowered. I was so it was such a matter of honor and life and death and passion for me to communicate to people and to demonstrate this in a court of law on the witness stand and to really bear truthful witness to the world through that historical record. of what happened and why this was a lie and a weapon designed to destroy the innocent. This was not just the government taking advantage of a convenient opportunity. I wish that were the case, but no. This was a wicked and evil, seditious conspiracy that was planned at various levels by various people, sort of like COVID, right? There wasn't one mastermind who pulled off the whole operation, but there were a number of people who had evil thoughts and intentions before the event itself actually transpired. And so there is plenty of evidence to suggest that these thoughts and intentions were being considered by various factions and elements of the government and of our corrupt uniparty system before January 6th actually occurred. For example, there's the well-documented history that President Trump duly authorized 10,000 National Guard troops. Obviously, that's the bare minimum you would want to put in place for an event that was forecast well in advance to have at least 500,000 people or more show up. And they know that because they had just had a previous rally a few weeks prior that had at least 400,000 to 500,000 people flooding the streets of DC. So this was no secret. There was a ton of FBI and intelligence community intel about the event, about potential unrest or violence happening, and certainly an enormous crowd where the president himself is going to be speaking and everything else. So the fact that these 10,000 National Guard troops were declined by Pelosi, of course, is no small matter and is a major piece of evidence illustrating how there were things happening before January 6th to create the conditions for this to happen. And it very much was a Fedsurrection entrapment event. And of course, it's ultimately a cover-up of the stolen 2020 election.
Gosh, I can't wait to read your book. I know it's just coming out end of June, but everyone needs to read this because there have been so many questions over this one day, this one event, and it's been used for harm, mostly used for evil in so many ways. So I can't wait to read it.
And still being used. In fact, Kyle, I know we're going to also discuss my upcoming run for Congress in Florida's 19th district. And, I want your audience to know something. I want people to understand that we are in an incredible moment in our nation's history. I keep telling people that 2026 is our generation's 1776. And that might seem perhaps melodramatic, but it's not. I can assure you. This is such a pivotal moment. These aren't really midterms. In this case, it's a final countdown to decide if we're going to engage in our government and reclaim our republic. That is our campaign mission. And a particular aspect of our campaign here in Florida 19 is, of course, the fact that myself, as a J6 patriot, I have a very interesting story, as we've been discussing, and as I hope people will read the book, because it's shocking beyond my ability to describe it now. And there's so many details and transcripts, and it's just a really shocking and powerful accounting. But as a J6 patriot who has survived that weaponized government, been vindicated and come out exonerated on the other side, having someone like that in Congress to support President Trump in this political moment and in this historical moment, there's nothing I can imagine that would be more powerful and effective to help President Trump and the Republican Party to defang this political weapon of J6 and to dismantle the weaponized government machinery that the left and the Uniparty has developed over so many years and which they are still using. I mean, look at Senator Tom Tillis, supposedly a Republican. He's a traitor and a disgrace to our country, and I say that clearly and proudly. But he's such a dishonor to our country, and he's still waving around this weapon of the J6 false narrative to demonize and destroy innocent people's lives. So we really do need to get engaged in our government in the 26 midterms. And the J6 issue is not just a fringe issue. It's really a flashpoint or a tip of a spear that we need to understand and really get to the bottom of bringing truth and justice and accountability back to our government.
Yeah, you're right on. It does feel like we are kind of at the edge and facing two very different futures. And we're feeling that very powerfully out here in California as we're watching the state attempt to see primary results go in a certain direction and knowing that they don't want to let go of this state and have anyone up in those files rooting around and peeking in those burn bags. And they're going to fight to keep control of the state. But it does really seem like what you're saying. I don't think it's too melodramatic. I think that it's time that we all wake up and recognize what's at stake, this year and not wait for 28. Not be complacent, because we have a lot of leaders, far too many leaders in both chambers of the House who have become lazy, complacent, fearful, quiet, and we definitely need leadership just like what you would bring. And I do want to talk about your campaign, but I want to ask you one more question before we move forward into kind of what's happening currently. You know, you and I met in person this last February, and you were sharing just a little bit of what you went through during this really harrowing time. You mentioned the solitary confinement, and
Yeah.
it pains me even to ask you about it because I can only imagine, but I think it's very necessary that the viewers and this audience hear and understand what you were put through during that year that was so outrageously unnecessary and egregious, if you're open to sharing about that.
Certainly. It was a very, very harsh and just an awful prison environment where I was incarcerated originally in Florida, later transferred to Louisiana. Gangster's paradise is the common slang term for the prison I happened to be in Miami. And I was further persecuted while there and placed into solitary confinement. These conditions are classified as a form of torture by Amnesty International and Geneva Conventions when the situation extends beyond a few days or so. And it is just unbelievable and shocking how long I was held there. And not only that, but in America, in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, there are laws and regulations, supposedly, and some of them are very, very critical to safety and survival of human beings that are kept in these facilities. Chief among those are a phone call at least every 7 days. That sounds like kind of a lot, but in isolation, you are deprived of almost every basic human need. You're in a concrete shoebox with a steel toilet and a steel shelf that you try to sleep on as it ruins your back and your neck. And that's about all that's there. So that phone call every 7 days, and I am not exaggerating, that is the difference between life and death. Because in the first few minutes, you are freaked out by the awfulness of the environment you're in. It is so oppressive and terrifying. The smells, the darkness, the dankness, the sounds of demonic screaming. I had no idea this would happen. I had no preparation for this, but the shrieking and screaming almost never stopped throughout the day. It reverberated in this concrete bunker with steel doors to become louder and more garish than you might otherwise imagine. It was so horrific. I hyperventilated just trying to crawl into my own body to escape from it. And just the first few hours of that experience calls into question, you start to panic. You're not sure if you can function, if you can survive. You have no idea what's happening or why. They don't explain anything to you. And in my case, they even gaslit me and even made it worse, trying to confuse me and to really break me down mentally. But I don't even know how I got through the first day of that. And then the next day, and you don't sleep the first day because you're in such misery. So the next day you're exhausted because you didn't really sleep, and you're trying to figure out, how can I possibly get to the end of another day of this? Now you're still counting hours and days because you're waiting for some news of something. And my mail was blocked. That's illegal. My attorneys were blocked. That's illegal. And I'm waiting for that phone call every 7 days. So I'm counting down 7 days to get a phone call so I can hear from someone. And I was never given that phone call.
Oh, God. Not for a whole
And I was
year.
and I was kept in that condition for 4 months.
Oh, my God.
So I describe this in some detail in the book, both the physical circumstances, the psychological warfare, the abuse that was done to me in various ways. It's a very compelling accounting of what happened. I really urge people to read it. It is dark, but it's necessary. And the only reason I am alive, and certainly the only reason I'm still sane, is because of the mercy and the grace and the power of our Almighty Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And the power of God preserved me. My faith in God is the only reason I even chose rejecting the plea deal to put myself in that prison environment. So it was that faith that brought me there and led me through those dark places. And that is truly the only reason that I have been able to overcome it And I am so grateful for my faith. I'm so grateful for the goodness of our God. I'm so grateful for the family he gave me and the upbringing I had to be strengthened by that in that really walking through the shadow of the valley of death experience.
Mm.
And I certainly hope that people will read and share my story and come to their own experience, seeking the goodness and comfort and strength of God, because it's very real. And my goodness, it is very necessary in such a place.
Gosh, it's so emotional just hearing you speak about this. And I know people are going to read this book. I know they're going to be tremendously impacted by it. We know how this part of the story ends with a full exoneration, a victory, justification of your total and complete innocence. But now you're starting another chapter. You're using what God allowed to have happen in your life that was more difficult than almost anything anyone can imagine. And now it's your opportunity to turn it to good and glorify him doing it. So you're running for office. You're a glutton for punishment.
Very much.
And here we
Very
go.
much so.
Here we go. We're running for Congress in District 19. Good for you and congratulations. And tell us what area of Florida that is and a little bit about what's going on in that particular district.
Absolutely. It is the greatest place in the world. I'm so blessed to live in Naples, Florida. We call it Freedom Town, USA. And Southwest Florida here in District 19 really is some of the greatest territory you'll find in our great country. I describe it as the way that America used to feel like about 50 or 60 years ago. Old time America still thrives here in Southwest Florida, and I really love it. So we truly cherish our freedom, our human rights, and our liberties and our destiny of pursuing that freedom, of pursuing prosperity and health and strength and family values, really raising our families to the glory of God and to the expansion of his kingdom here on earth, God's will on earth as it is in heaven. That's our prayer. Our state flag bears the motto, "In God We Trust," as our national motto does as well. And we actually believe in that. We take it seriously here. And we also have a lot of fun. Florida man is a meme and a whole moniker of just being comfortable with yourself and just loving the goodness and the grit that God gave us here in America, with beautiful beaches, incredible Everglades, all kinds of nature, lots of industry. There's beauty and glamour and fashion and restaurants, and everything is here. And the whole country is coming here because freedom is actually protected, liberty is defended, and the virtuous character that God calls us all to live in is actually honored. So I'm amazed. It's just an amazing place. I'm so blessed to live in Southwest Florida. And politically, it's very interesting. This district, of course, has been home to Byron Donalds in the Congress for a number of years, and he is now running to be the next governor of the state of Florida as Ron DeSantis is termed out. And so it's my honor to run for that seat. I actually live here in the district over 4 years. And in prison, I really did feel God call me to step forward and run for public office. It's not something I ever planned to do. And so you could say maybe I'm still double checking occasionally as I drink from the fire hose of learning how to run for political office. I've never run for political office before. I actually think that is one of my best assets. I really believe, and I hear this all over the district and frankly all over the country, that Americans are really just sick and tired of the corrupt uniparty establishment, of the uniparty status quo, truly endless corruption, and the corruption is at staggering levels we can barely wrap our minds around. The Congress just approved sending more money to Ukraine. I mean, are you freaking kidding me right now? I can't. I cannot handle that anymore. It's such a disgrace, and it's utterly destroying the future of our generation and the younger generation trying to grow up, get a home, get married, raise kids. You know, I want that future for myself and hopefully my future kids someday. And we have to really get serious about taking our country back. So, Kyle, the thing I want to tell people is the war for America is waged at the primary election level. So if voters only show up in November, they've already lost. And so many Americans aren't thinking about this or realizing this. unfortunately, many Americans don't even vote at all, which is a huge, I mean, it's a shame and it's a disgrace really to
Mhm.
our country. So we really need to get sober-minded and serious about that. But when people say elections, they just think November, right? That's what they think. And you don't actually get to participate in the process of choosing the right candidates. If you don't participate in primaries, you will essentially be selecting the lesser of two evils in most cases. And it's more true than it's ever been. So primaries are so critical. We need to increase voter awareness and education, engagement in the process, get involved in your local Republican party in your county. And, I became an elected committeeman in my Republican executive committee here in Collier County in Southwest Florida. And that's the starting point of the process. But yeah, we do urge people to go to johnstrand.com. Every dollar really is important for
Mhm.
us. We're not funded by the establishment. So we need that financial support so we can run this race the next 2 months or so to August 18. That is our D Day, and it is a critical day. We have a real chance to win this race, especially if we can marshal the endorsement of President Trump. And that's our mission, engaging with the people to spread the word so that President Trump will hear this story himself directly. He's got a lot of things on his plate and a lot on his shoulders. We know that, and we support what he's doing to save this country. But we want to bring to his attention that there is a January 6th patriot that went to prison for
Mhm.
President Trump and for the MAGA movement. And we are so excited for our chance to redeem that suffering, to bring real truth, courage, and accountability to government, and to put an unwavering supporter and soldier to help President Trump into Congress in Florida 19 on August 18.
Absolutely. And we are very energized for you to be doing this. So many people run for office and they give their pitch and they try to win over the voters. And we have to take a guess, right? We haven't seen them in their day to day. We haven't experienced them going
Right.
through
Certainly under pressure. You haven't seen them.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And you are a known quantity in the best way possible.
Right.
Faith under pressure and a man of integrity. You're a Florida man and a man of integrity. And the voters have a really good choice in voting for you, John. I'm just really excited. You're so well spoken. You're highly intelligent. You're fired up and motivated to go back to the Capitol in service of your district, of your state, and of your
Yes.
country. And I
Yes.
love this. It's really inspirational, and I appreciate you sharing everything. I want to get a plug for the book, June 23rd, Patriot Plea: The J6 Journey of a Political Prisoner in the Divided States of America.
Ah,
Gosh, I hope that changes, and I think that you're going to be one of those people to really lead the way there. You know, you've had a really unique struggle, of course, but how has this affected or colored the way that you have seen the inner workings of government, now wanting to be one of those people who legislates and who has a higher political leadership position?
so it has really emphasized and strengthened my very practical understanding of the power of consequences, and the extent to which that corrupted power can destroy lives. So it's not an abstract or theoretical or philosophical discussion for me. This is nuts and bolts of survival. This is the brass tacks of good versus evil. And evil is very evil in these times. It is very wicked and destructive. It is very personal. And it's coming to hashtag you next. No one is safe from evil in this time. And that is because the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good men to play it safe. I saw this during COVID. I rose up and responded aggressively because of my understanding of that truth. And of course, it's only been ever more affirmed. So this experience has taught me just how evil and just how destructive corrupted power can become in government. And also, it has shown me how difficult it is for those with good intentions and well meaning people to try to affect change and improve a system uh, that has gradually, systematically become so oversized and so overly complicated and so overly corrupted that it is seemingly not humanly possible to fix. But here's the key. We learned in my story, Patriot Plea, that as Jesus said in the scripture, without God, none of this is possible. But with God, all things are possible. With God, a American kid that had a dream to tell his story, to work in the arts and communication as a musician and as an actor, has his life turned upside down, has gone through hell, and is now in a position where he can run as a representative of the people, as our constitutional system was designed and as our founders intended, that we would be represented by our own people and be self-governed, that we have an opportunity to reclaim that. And we have a moment where we must seize that opportunity for ourselves and for our posterity, for our children and for our future. So I am so excited to be a part of that process, but the experience taught me how dangerous corrupted power is and how difficult it is even for well-meaning people to affect change, because the pressure, the temptations are massive. And it is going to take such an incredible commitment and diligence. It is going to take so much humility. It is going to take so much turning towards God and seeking divine wisdom and discernment. So our campaign slogan for johnstrand.com is courage to fight, wisdom to lead. We have to have courage in this time. It says it on the back of my book, but we need to pair that courage with wisdom, with the proper understanding of how to use the knowledge we have and apply that effectively, strategically, and in a moral way, with just a fierce commitment to integrity and ethics. And it's just very difficult to do that in Washington, D.C. That's why very few people even try, and those who do try often fail. But again, with God, all things are possible. I know that because he's already proven it to me through prison to politics. So.
Amen to that. Hey, I got a question for you. Are you seeking any kind of restitution for what happened to you?
Yes, I certainly am. I have attorneys, excellent attorneys, retained for that purpose. It is ongoing. Unfortunately, it's very slow. The wheels of justice don't turn the way they should, especially in these times and particularly with this situation. But yes, I am part of a group of folks that are pursuing that. I believe it is absolutely essential. Justice, by its very nature, means that something is restored to those harmed. That is part of the process of restoring the balance to what's right and wrong. And also, there must be accountability. There must be punishment for evildoers, because without accountability and punishment, the evildoers are emboldened, and they will continue to wreak havoc and destroy the innocent, and it will get worse. The Bible lists that very clearly. So it is biblical, it is essential. We must have justice, we must have restitution for those harmed. And again, as I mentioned earlier, and just please read the book at johnstrand.com/book, the level of destruction that J6ers have suffered is historic and unprecedented in American history. It's really awful beyond what you could possibly imagine if you dig into the details. And we will be digging into those details. I'm running for Congress at johnstrand.com, and I am going to seek appointment to the Oversight Committee where Byron Donalds currently sits and serves, because we need true accountability in our government, and we need a lot more courage in that direction.
I'm really glad to hear it. I mean, obviously, no amount of money would ever make up for or heal what you had to experience and what you were put through. But I think on the accountability side, just as you're saying, it's just absolutely necessary that this continues to be exposed. I mean, the American public also deserves answers about what happened on January 6th. And maybe you as an insider and as a political prisoner from that day, you can offer us the best ways that we as a nation should look at what happened on that day. How do we look back to January 6, 2021 and view it appropriately and factually?
Great question, Kyle. I've said, and I mentioned in the book, that I believe January 6th was our American Reichstag fire. So, of course, that's the infamous moment of the Nazi Germany creating the conditions to justify their tyrannical intentions as they were moving towards terrorizing Europe and murdering 6 million Jews. So there was a building that was burned with the pretext of justifying their use of force against those that they framed as the instigators of the enemy. And this was similar to what happened on January 6th because the uniparty, there's Republicans and Democrats both involved, as there often are. But of course, there was a Democrat Party message of framing the Republican Party and the MAGA supporters of President Trump as domestic terrorists, et cetera. And that was all utilized to cover up the stolen election in 2020, which again is another just historic evil that needs to be exposed. But the Reichstag fire parallel, I think, is appropriate in terms of understanding how this event was used and weaponized. And the other thing that I would mention to folks is that January 6th, I really actually see it as a sort of a constitutional defibrillator because for almost a century, actually, if you look at the history of our country, our convictions, our willingness to claim we are one nation under God and to point to Almighty God as our source and as our good creator who has called us and designed us to be free and to pursue goodness and virtue. We have slowly eroded those foundations and essentially divorced ourselves from God. So especially over the last 50, 60, 70 years in our nation's history, culturally and politically, we have secularized and we have really eroded the foundations of our culture. And our country is so divided and the political temperature is so accelerated because of those things. And I kind of feel that our country was asleep spiritually in that sense. And I think the stolen election was an opportunity for us to seize the moment to wake up and assess where's our country going, how do we get to this point. And I just feel like J6 was such a flashpoint that there is a pulse still in our country because there was a call to show up at the Capitol to protest against an election that was clearly improper in many different ways and say, hold on a second, you can't just sweep this under the rug. We have government by the consent of the governed, and we do not consent to this obviously fraudulent election just being papered over as the most secure election in history, as the Biden administration tried to, convince us laughably. So people showed up. There were 1 million patriots or so that got to DC that day. I consider them all heroes and true patriots that they put it down on the line to travel at their own expense. Most of them were middle class or poor people that just showed up and said, I believe in America. I believe in representative governance. I believe in the constitutional framework and that this must be audited and proven to all of us that we can accept the transfer of power in the proper way. And that was not afforded to us for the obvious reasons, but that's what I would comment about January 6th in a historical perspective. It's really important.
Yeah, well, again, can't wait to read it. Everybody go buy Patriot Plea. Check out the good work being done by Dr. Simone Gold and John over there at goldcare.com. We did a really fascinating episode of Politically Basic with Simone Gold on COVID and the falsities and mistruths about it. It was great, and I just respect her so tremendously.
Yeah.
John, I can't thank you enough for being with me today and sharing everything that you have. I know there's so much more to say and to share, but we're going to be watching with support, with interest, and with prayers over this campaign for Florida's 19th. And we just wish you all of the best. And as tough as it is to hear about this experience, because our heart breaks for you and we hate that you went through it, as God usually does, he allows strong people to go through things just like this so that you can use it for good. He will use it for good. You are clearly answering the call and stepping into your purpose that he has laid in front of you. And it's just so commendable. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor. Thank you for having me on. It's a very exciting opportunity to bring courage, common sense, and Christian values back into the government. That is my mission, and I can promise the American people and the residents of Southwest Florida that I will never stand down and never sell out in the fight to defend America for Americans. And so I'm really honored and excited to be a champion of the people, because that's all I am, is one of the people. That's all I want for all of us, is to be self-governed, and to be have a clear conscience before God, to seek our destiny that He's called us, which is to be free through the mercy and sacrifice of our Savior Jesus Christ, and the incredible foundation of values that God has given us to flourish in this world. And what an honor and a blessing. And thank you for your time, Kyle, and for the work that you do.
Well, amen to everything that you just said. Thank you again, John. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic. We remain committed to breaking down the basics so that you get to decide. Be sure to check us out at politicallybasic.com and follow us across all socials at Politically Basic so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.